Welcome to the STR Data Lab.
Hello and welcome to the STR Data Lab. I'm Jamie Lane, Chief Economist at AirDNA, and I'm joined today by a very interesting guest. We have Vanessa Aguirre, the creator of the Femme House, with us for the show today. Vanessa, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here today.
Yeah, so we recently did a deep dive, and it's the start of a new series that we're doing on looking into specific guest avatars. So whether it's girls trips and bachelorette groups, whether it's guys golf trips, whether it's hospital stays, whether it's family beach trips, and in the course of that research, we found your sort of amazing set of properties that have really gone after sort of bachelorette groups, girls trips in sort of key markets that are really supportive of that. So I wanted to get you on the show, sort of talk about how you got into it and the sort of pros, the cons of going after specific groups like that. But maybe we just start for the audience. How did you get into short-term rentals and where are you at today?
Yeah, definitely. So, my husband and I decided in 2020 that we wanted to get into short-term rentals. And I'm based out of Chicago, and we thought, in doing our research, we found an AirDNA blog post, and it mentioned Nashville was one of the top markets. So that's where our research actually started. And we were like, yeah, Nashville's only an hour away. Let's check out some properties in Nashville. We decided to move forward. And as we kind of got to thinking about how we're going to market this, the design, I started looking at other properties that were doing well in the area. And at the time, we actually got married in 2020. So I was in my bride era, wedding mindset, all the things that go with it. And I thought, I know a lot of girls go to Nashville for their bachelorettes, and I'm looking at the Airbnbs and I'm like, there's nothing really that's catering to girls trips or bachelorettes. And that's a big, demographic of traveler there. So I'm like, what if we just lean into that? I'm not a professional designer. We didn't have the budget to hire a designer at the time. So I'm like, let's just see how that goes. So really leaned into it. Think neon signs, pink and purple, color palette, murals. We hired a muralist. And within the first week of going live, the bookings just started rolling in. And we're like, okay, I think we have something here, leaning into this niche.
Oh, that's awesome. And sort of how did that evolve? I assume you do your first property or even your first version of that one property, and then you see how people use it, you see how it gets booked, and then you decide to do more, you decide to and add things. What was the evolution of sort of catering to those groups?
So within a week, like I said, the booking started rolling in, and I immediately was like, okay, this is definitely something we can scale. So from there, I started doing research into other bachelorette markets where we're traveling to bachelorettes. And I found that Scottsdale was actually the second largest market, which aligns with your report. So that's kind of interesting. And I started looking at properties and made it my goal, immediately within that first week, we're going to Scottsdale next. So about a year later, we had acquired our second property, and I almost fully leaned in with that second one. So bigger murals, we did a beauty bar, and just went full out. We even have a mural in the backyard that says "I do crew."
That's awesome. Yeah, I was looking through, and we'll link to your sort of your TikTok in the show notes, and you go through it, and it's very pink. But also it's so geared towards that group where you've really leaned in. And when I first started in the industry, it was around the same time in 2020. The theme that I was hearing from a lot of investors was there's riches in the niches. With hotels, everyone goes and you got 200 rooms, you got to sell all 200 rooms. You can't make each room sort of unique, but with short-term rentals, you only have one unit you have to sell, and all you have to do is essentially get on any given night, there's got to be one group that wants to book your property. And if you go after specific groups, like a lot of time, and if you go after them well, like a lot of times you could be that property and you can be the one that gets booked over and over again. But as I think we saw in our report, and we'll link to that too, is sort of diving into bachelorette groups and the markets and the returns that you can get from it. It's also become more and more popular to have themed type homes. So how have you seen the competition evolve in Nashville, in Scottsdale, as you've been operating in those markets?
Yeah, definitely. And to your point, when I started in 2020, like boutique hotels with the wallpaper and the neon signs, but you weren't really seeing that as much in Airbnbs. So that was kind of the beginning. And 5 years later, I don't really even believe like pink wallpaper and paint and neon signs is enough. You really have to focus on a true experiential stay and what that looks like specifically to a bachelorette group if you're wanting to successfully get into this niche. So you kind of have to like think like a bride, what's trending this season, what amenities would they want for their group, and really put a lot of thought into curating the experience. So I guess as far as like how my designs have evolved, my second property had a 4-person beauty bar. This new one has a 7-person beauty bar. And I'm always looking for ways to top what I did with the last. So the design's always going to be focused on functionality and social worthy moments. So with the newest property that I launched, we have a heart-shaped mini golf. So, it's an amenity, but it's also a photo worthy moment. We have a backdrop. So I noticed a lot of bachelorette groups were hiring decorators to come in and set up a backdrop, which sometimes can be like $800 for the rental. Well, I'm like, I'm just going to put one up on the wall, and that is their backdrop that they can add decor to. And it also doubles as a karaoke stage. So I have a karaoke machine, another amenity, and that's their stage. So thinking, how can we make this social worthy, but also tie it into the amenities that these groups are looking for? Yeah, pretty much. The kitchen is pink. We have disco cups in the kitchen. So really just thinking like, what are these bachelorette groups going to want to kind of elevate their stay and make it easier for them to come in and have a great time.
Yeah. Has there been any surprises in the type of groups that these properties have actually been attracting? Like, is it just bachelorette groups, or are there other groups that are finding their way into these homes as well?
So I would say probably 90% is bachelorette groups. I'll get like the occasional birthday trip, but the nice thing about bachelorette groups as well, and it's one of the pros in catering to this niche, is that they book so far in advance, so you're able to capture that revenue sooner than later. And the girls that know what they want for their bachelorette, they're booking in advance. So yeah, typically further out than like a birthday celebration or a family trip or a girls trip that can be
Yeah.
booked last
And
minute.
do you know that number offhand, like how far on average people are booking for your properties?
Um, it has changed over the years. I do feel like lately with the economy, we're seeing 6 months to, a year out, where in years past we were seeing like a year to sometimes even a year and 3 months, a year and a half out. So it really
That's crazy.
yeah, it is one of the nice things about catering to this niche. But with the pros also come, they have a lot more expectations on the stay and everything. They want everything to be perfect because it's almost like it's an extension of their bridal era, wedding era, and that so when you're looking to capture the premium, you also have to make sure your offering is aligning with that premium that you're wanting to charge.
Yeah. And in our research, we showed, and for the properties that we could identify as sort of bachelorette friendly listings, and it was generating premiums like 35% more revenue compared to other similar size listings in the same areas. Is that sort of similar to your experience on what you've seen these properties generating, or do you think it's more or less? Like, what do you see in your market?
I think that probably is pretty accurate. We don't do, just for like more insight, we don't do like a pricing tool. We price it ourselves because we're finding that the groups are willing to pay more of a premium rather than just, so if it's like a 4-bedroom, 2-bath, more than our neighbor that is a 4-bedroom, 2-bath, just because it's super themed out.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. What I also love about short-term rentals is like with hotels, like with the brand, you sort of have this, the brand can sort of sometimes give you a ceiling of like, oh, like for even a nice hotel, like, oh, like $400 or $500 a night is probably the most someone's going to be willing to pay for these properties. With these really unique properties, especially during peak season, I bet the premium that you can charge for that, where you're a one-of-kind property in a supply constrained time, that the rates you can charge can be a lot.
Yeah, I definitely, I would agree to that. And I think my biggest, I guess, like advice for anyone looking to get into this niche is, if you want, like, you have to differentiate. Even like I said, just saying I'm going to make a bachelorette house, or I'm going to create a bachelorette house and it's going to be pink and this and that. You have to think, what else can I offer that maybe the other ones aren't offering? That way you are able to, charge a higher rate, because it is kind of its own little market too.
Yeah. And I've got a property. It's a large property, 5 bedrooms. We host a lot of big groups, and there's definitely, I would say not a lot, but a little contention with the neighbors. Like, you're having big groups sort of constantly in. When you have big groups together, people can be loud. Fortunately for my property, it's not super near anyone, so and there hasn't been any major issues. But and how have you seen sort of and tackling that of, and when you have large groups of girls, they're not necessarily going to be quiet while they're staying there, nor can you ask them to be quiet while they're staying there for that group. So has that been an issue for you at all?
So we haven't had any issues. And I think, to your point, like whether you're hosting girls trips, bachelorettes, or, big groups, where's your listing at? Sorry, I didn't ask.
It's in North Georgia.
In North
It's in
Georgia.
the
Okay.
mountains. Yeah.
So probably mostly family trips.
It's mostly family. So we do get, sort of groups of girls, groups of guys that are sort of doing sort of retreat weekends.
Okay, very cool. So my thought is, regardless of who you're catering to, I think it's really important to maintain good relationships with the neighbors, and then also set clear communication with guests and co-sign multiple times with those guests throughout the guest journey. So both before, during, before and during, really. So we do noise monitoring. We have Ring cameras, obviously. And then as far as communication, we're asking them obviously to review the rules before booking, review the rules before checking in. If they're going to have vendors, which is pretty common with some of these bachelorette groups, to let me know who they are, so that if there's anyone that's, not allowed, I can reiterate that, and then re-communicating once they check in again, like, hey, be respectful of the neighbors, the noise ordinance. So we're very clear on communication, and luckily I've had very respectful guests, and haven't had an issue.
Yeah. The other thing I've heard from groups, or from other investors sort of catering to large groups like this, is that they've had a lot of success with upsells of additional things that you can sort of provide to those groups. Now we've seen the release of Airbnb's sort of services where you can sort of offer a lot of things sort of coming in house, even though, and as of now, and you can't earn anything additional, and if they're booking through Airbnb. So is that something that you offer to your groups and that you've seen success on?
So I think there's a lot of potential for, like, like you said, add-ons. I used to, with Nashville, like the first maybe year or two that we had launched that property, I used to offer like balloon garland setup, like backdrop, and then just have someone come in and just like upcharge that. But I realized quickly that it was just not worth the extra, headache of dealing with it. So I have really good partners that I work with. I recommend them, and yeah, we just let the vendors that do what they do best. But I do think there's a lot of opportunity to, do add-ons with bachelorettes, and
Mhm.
even like referrals, like commission, like there are opportunities.
Yeah. There's a property we always stay at in Nashville because there's always sort of short-term rental events. And one of the hosts was an AirDNA client, and they reached out. They're like, "You're welcome to come stay at our property." And we went and stayed at their property. And they had created this bus to take bachelorette groups downtown and sort of hired local firemen to sort of bartend the bus. And it seemed just like a great opportunity to, one, have a excellent option for these groups of doing something they may have not otherwise done, but also like a way to earn additional revenue from guests that were already staying at your property.
Definitely. Yeah, I do think there's a lot of ways to get creative. And even sometimes I have like ideas and I'm like, do I do that? Do I not? Is it worth it? But I've found lately that I'm like, I just want to kind of stay in my lane, focus on the hosting and the experience I'm providing with that.
Yeah. And are there like any little things? Like I know like the mini golf and sort of the beauty bars those are pretty big investments, right? And those aren't, are there any sort of smaller ones that you've seen that like were maybe great ideas, like not a ton of additional work, but you saw a really big payoff on?
Yeah, I feel like the beauty bar, I mean, installing a beauty bar is actually not that bad, right? It's like a couple of shelves and mirrors, if you have the space for it. I think that is like a really practical, functional, social worthy moment. And definitely if you're hosting girls trips, that just provides additional getting ready space, which no one's ever going to be upset about, right? So I feel like that's an easy one. And then just like amenities, like the kitchen utensils. If you're catering to girls trips, everything is pink in our kitchen. Pink plates, pink, pots and pans. Things you're already going to have to buy that you can just like make it a little more fun. I think the groups really appreciate that.
Yeah. And you talked about the sort of high expectations going into it. I think that's been, and I think a common question with many hosts of like, do I go after higher end, more needy guests because it's going to be harder to sort of get that 5-star review? And if I don't get that 5-star review, then there's going to be sort of downstream implications for that. So, and how do you think about that? Is it worth going after these high-end luxury clients that are willing to pay a lot because you can get the money and you can have sort of have those high standards, or and is there sort of a trade-off there?
When I got into this, like I said, I had just gotten married and I honestly had a really bad experience with the coordinator at my reception venue. And I just remember thinking like, I would never treat a bride like this. And I feel like that like I never left that mindset. I just treat, because we opened our Airbnb like a month after we got married. So I never lost that mindset of like, this is really important to them. They're very excited. Like I match that energy when I'm chatting with them. And yeah, you do have to know, like, I think what sets, because there's a lot of bachelorette houses now, but what sets the ones that do really well apart from the ones that are, it's just like an investor and he saw this thing on TikTok and he decided to try to replicate it. But that energy is not in it. I think that's the difference between the ones that do really well and the ones that don't. And you have to know, like, this is really important to them. And I know any like family trips and girl trips, they're all important, but this is something that is an extension of their wedding. So they're looking at it like that. And it's almost like you're like, I'm hosting, but when a girl is having her bachelorette, like she invited all her friends. So in a way, she's kind of hosting and she wants to make sure all her friends are having fun. And it's like, there's just like this added, like, I know that I feel like responsible in a way. Like it's an extra level of like, okay, like, I need to make sure I'm providing like a really good experience for these girls.
Yeah. There's nothing passive about when you go into this sort of niche. You've got to know that you've got to level up and your enthusiasm around hosting. There cannot be anything left to chance. And you've got to go a little bit above and beyond. Maybe if you weren't going after this group of
Exactly.
travelers.
I wouldn't say this niche is for a passive host, like someone who's looking for like a passive investment. And just that's my thoughts around it if you really want to do well. And another thing is that just in general, like the wedding industry and like bachelorette industry, it is so trend focused and trend based. And like what was cool a year ago is not cool anymore. So you almost like the listing has to evolve, the way you market it and present it has to evolve. So like I spend a lot of time on that, and just making sure like it's still relevant and we're keeping up with trends. I try to do at the beginning of every year a content shoot with like themes that I think are going to be like really exciting this year. So I almost even like try to think of myself as like a I almost even like try to think of myself as like a trendsetter in the space of bachelorettes. Even I know a lot of my TikTok followers will like look to me for that, like what's trending in the bachelorette space.
Yeah. Funny enough, my dad was worked at a wedding venue as the on-site coordinator. So he spent 20 years and every weekend working with brides, and you could see, and one, he had that enthusiasm, but two, after it was over, the drain afterwards of, yeah, and when you're on, you're on, and when you're off, and it's a lot of work.
Exactly, but it's a lot of fun too.
Yeah.
I do really enjoy it.
Yeah. So, and are there any other things that you think would be a surprise to someone? Because I honestly, it was one of our biggest concerns around writing a piece around going after these different groups was we weren't going to be able to really, we could talk about all the upside, but we weren't going to be able to, without and hosting and having the experience of hosting a lot of these groups, talk through what the additional, not only work is, not only additional risk, but also the additional expenses that go into having these sort of theme properties. Because I know with mine, the more and more amenities you have, like the more and more opportunities you have for things to break, especially when you're hosting big groups. Because it's not like in an urban market where they're going to come in, they're going to, I'm just using it for the bed. And when they're sort of hosting big groups, like your property is going to get some wear and tear. Like they didn't book for it with a pool and a mini golf course just to like look at the pool and mini golf course, and that they're actually going out and use it. So has there been any surprises for you around like the additional expense or operations around your properties?
I would say so. The city that you choose, the demographic that you choose. So, like for example, Nashville, our bachelorette house in Nashville, it's girls are pretty much just using it as a crash pad. They're spending most of their time on Broadway, out enjoying the city, and they're not spending as much time at the house. Whereas in Scottsdale, when we were setting it up, we're like, okay, we know we need a really big yard. Like we have an oversized yard, we have mini golf, we have pool, and those girls tend to have hibachi coming in, and they have like yoga classes at the house, so they're spending a lot more time at the houses, so naturally you're going to get more wear and tear with that. But we've never had anything like any crazy incidents or anything like that. But just in general, keep in mind, what are the travelers going to be doing there, and I don't think that's necessarily like a bachelorette thing as much as just where you're choosing to host, right? Are people out and about, or are they going to be putting extra wear and tear on the house? And obviously the number of girls at the house or number of guests, yeah, that's more people at the house, right? So more wear and tear, but nothing like excessive or crazy.
Yeah. And you said you're based in Chicago. Your properties are based in Nashville and Scottsdale. So how has the sort of remote hosting been for you? Have you found that difficult? Have you found it nice that you sorry, I can't come over to the property to help you sort of figure out the remote. Like, how has that been?
So I actually really like it. I feel like hosting remote kind of forced me in the beginning to like set my systems up properly. And obviously we have contacts that we can call if we need anything, but almost like the distance, like if I actually lived in the city that I was hosting, I think I'd want to do more. And I'm like, we're doing a lot. We don't need to do more. But yeah, I do think it's really good, and it kind of puts that distance between me and hosting. And like I said, it's not really passive, but it keeps it a little more passive than it would be if I was actually there.
Yeah. So, and you mentioned our list and that you're already operating in our top two sort of bachelorette markets, Nashville and Scottsdale. For the listeners, I'll sort of walk through the next six. So we've got Austin, Charleston, sort of Coachella Valley, Palm Springs. We've got Miami Beach, New Orleans, and Savannah. All seem like great bachelorette markets. As you think about sort of what's next for you, and you sort of mentioned maybe Austin, like, is this something that you want to build up to a portfolio of multiple listings? Are you wanting to double down on the markets that you're in? Like, how do you think about future, or like, Jamie, I've got two, maybe three, but that's enough work. Like, how are you thinking about the future?
So we have currently one in Nashville and two in Scottsdale. And prior to purchasing the second one in Scottsdale, we actually looked at Austin. We went and met with a realtor and looked at some properties. We ended up deciding against, but that is definitely a market that I think would do really well. My thought in general, and I know obviously like the data is that's where girls are going. That's, you can see the data speaks for itself. But my thought is I actually think that I would look to go to a market that doesn't have as many listings that you would be competing with. So not that these markets are saturated, they're just competitive, right? So if you can get into a market early and kind of make it like a niche, like cool destination for girls to go to, I think that also would do really well. Because and then another thing is just like I said, I got married a couple years ago. My friends are still getting married, and when we're thinking about, or when they start thinking about bachelorettes, they're like, "Well, we've already done Nashville, we've already done Scottsdale." So you want to go somewhere new. They want their bachelorette to be different than the ones that we've already gone on. So I do think other cities that are like a little more niche would also be a good idea to consider as well. And that would be my path, I think, moving forward.
So maybe like a similar type market university that has like a great downtown area and bar strip that could be a regional destination for trips because and again, you don't have to generate thousands of people wanting to come and stay at this property. It's like, you only have to rent it out, 30, 40 times and over a year and you're doing well, right?
Exactly. So I just went on I'm just going to use this as an example. My best friend just got married and we went to Newport, Rhode Island for her bachelorette. And I posted a few posts, just like so many people asked me where we stayed. I didn't even look into like the regulations or anything in Rhode Island, or Newport, but where there's already a lot of trips going, maybe not as many as Scottsdale or Nashville, but there's an opportunity there. So that would be kind of my thought too, is like a little more niche.
Yep. So I've got some like rapid fire questions for you. I'm getting to the wrap up. I think they're fun. And if you're game, maybe I'll say them and then we can get some short answers. Does that sound good?
Okay. Sounds good.
Is there one review that you got that like is like memorable to you?
Yes. I had this is like my Bridezilla story, but maybe this one won't be so short.
Yeah, that's fine.
I had just opened
like a good story.
Okay. I had just opened my first Scottsdale property. We maybe had 2 stays prior, and I get this girl that reached out and she was like, "My bachelorette's booked in Miami, but it's gonna rain and I'm having all my girls switch to Scottsdale. Can we book your place?" And I'm like, "Well, the booking window is gonna close soon." So, and she's like, "Okay, we booked. We changed our flights." And she was really nervous. Like after she booked, I could tell she was like, "Oh no, what did I just do?" Asked a million questions. And then she ended up leaving me a bad review. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." And it was our brand new listing. So yeah, I probably wouldn't have, if I could go back, I'd be like, "There's Bridezilla signs on the table." I would not do that again.
Are there other, and maybe we'll stop with the lightning round. Are there other sort of red flags that you get from guests that are like, our property might not be a great like fit for you? Or is it, accept everyone?
No, we pretty much, I don't really feel like, maybe just like when they ask a lot of questions, but I feel like that would be the same for any niche, like you kind of start feeling like, okay, this guest is going to be a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, Vanessa, this has been a ton of fun. I can tell you, I'm not looking right now to add a bachelorette group listing, but I suspect from our listeners, you might find some new competition. It sounds like a lucrative segment to go after. So, and you mentioned your TikTok. Can you sort of and let people know where to find you, how to see more things about your listings?
Yeah, it's Vanessa Aguirre. And on my TikTok, I just share a lot of like behind the scenes while I'm at the house, design. I have like a making of a batch house series. So if you decide to take on the niche of bachelorette houses, just say hi. I'd love to meet you. It is a small community of like pink Airbnbs and bachelorette houses. So let's be friends.
Awesome. Vanessa, thanks so much for joining. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Have a good one.